Welcome to a look inside my mind and life as we bring you another episode of the 21st Century Schizoid Man.
We interrupt you from this podcast to bring you this special message. This podcast is not for children. There's occasional use of explicit language. Viewer discretion is advised.
This beat was made by the 21st Century Schizoid Man. Now, enjoy the podcast.
I'm your host, Moff.
Wait, hold on. I thought you said this episode would have me talking more than usual. So why don't I start this episode off?
This is your show. Nobody wants to hear about the life of the 21st century. Boring as millennial.
Damn it, the Dark Passenger is back. Let me talk to it for a bit.
Yo, you do realize no one else can hear it, right?
Don't worry, I told you sometimes you gotta negotiate with it so you can get the advantage. I'm just talking to it for a moment.
All right.
Listen here, Dark One, or whatever you call yourself. It's still my show, and he's gonna be talking mainly about my life. He's just telling my story from a different perspective.
Don't call me the Dark One. You know I use the voices of people you know. So you better refer to me by those names and not as the Dark One.
No one else can hear you besides me. Anyways, I'm not going to name drop people without proof that you are who you actually say you are. This episode is about the support side of the schizoid, so he can tell it better. Go ahead with your boring ass.
All right, so we're not going to stick with this boring ass nickname. Like, no, we done with that.
I mean, you said it yourself in the first episode, so no point trying to dodge it.
Whatever, man. I wanted to talk about what it was like for us with your first hospitalization. And I think it was back in 2012, which I think that was the summer before my 5th year in college and your senior year in high school. But the first symptom we all noticed was the disorganized speech and abnormal motor behavior. You literally stopped speaking to us. We couldn't figure out why you wouldn't talk, so our mom was hysterical at that point. You started exhibiting your first signs of catatonia. Yeah, I remember thinking you were joking in the beginning because the voices told you to divert attention away from the problem. You had us thinking it was just you being silly, and however, out of nowhere, you stopped eating. And like we were in the middle of a serious bulking meal plan. Like we were pretty skinny back then, and we were trying to do like and the simple fact that you stopped eating at that point, then I realized something was seriously wrong. Because you loved working out back then.
Correction, that was when Nee told you something was wrong.
Bro, what are you talking about? I definitely knew something was wrong when you started looking small, man. You were, at one point, you were huge, man. You were working out consistently. And, yeah, you were looking swell, bro. But just to clarify for people that don't know, Nee is our older cousin who's really into fitness. I mean, this guy's like he's like 6 foot. 210 pounds. This dude is chiseled, man. This dude is fit, and I think we're actually gonna have him we're actually gonna have him on our episode where we talk about the importance of mental health and fitness. But he was actually the one that got both of us into recreational bodybuilding, which and building a stable fitness routine for a mentally ill person is always a positive.
Well, when you said I was skipping meals, the excuse I made was that I was trying to fit in more calories in a single meals and eat twice a day.
Yeah, I think I remember that bullshit. But lying about diet is a problem for many people suffering from a variety of mental illnesses. And then soon after, his doctors tacked on bulimia to his chart. And then at that point, I noticed that his body had changed remarkably in like a short amount of time. And I said to him, like, bro, you looking real small. Like, what's going on? Like, you know you can tell me anything, right?
Me and my brother are pretty close. But back then, the Dark Passenger wouldn't let me say anything. It actually wasn't until recently that I let my brother know about the Dark Passenger controlling most of the decisions I make. Since I couldn't actually tell him what was going on, I just said, I don't want the meds to make me too big, so I'm cutting meals.
And at that point, I said, bro, I know something's wrong. You might as well tell me now so we don't have to handle it later or before it escalates. And that's when he even started to act even stranger. Like he started stalling his body like he was playing freeze tag, and in the middle of our conversation, his eyes were completely fixed on a certain point in the wall. Like no motions, no words, no eye movement, just silence. There would be lack of movement and a piercing glare. And this is when I had to make a serious judgment call. Either I take him to the hospital before his final year of high school, or just let the symptoms continue to mount, which usually is never the answer. I decided to wait it out just for a little bit, maybe a few hours. And then a little bit later, my mom called me, and she called me and told me to come check on him. And there he was, lying on the floor, eyes darting forward, arms at his side, and on his stomach. It looked like a scene out of The Exorcist, like he was possessed or something. And then I called our cousin so we could transport him to the hospital. And my cousin gets there, and we picked him up off the floor and took him to the car. And at first we were able to sit him up so he was upright in the car, but as soon as we started the car, he broke out into plank position again in the back seat. And then we get to the emergency room, and the nurse asks us some routine questions.
Hello, I'm the nurse. Your family tells me they are worried about your behavior lately. Is there anything you'd like to tell me?
Don't say anything. Stay in the plank position and stare ahead like a good soldier.
I adjust my body so my arm is in a military salute. The dark passenger convinced me that I was fighting a mental war as a U.S. soldier, like that MK Ultra program the CIA had back in the 60s. I would go on to respond with yes and yes sirs and yes ma'ams to hospital personnel.
Even the nurse was dumbfounded at his behavior. He asked if he had been taking any drugs or had any substance abuse issues, and we definitely responded with a no, because usually at this point he would have told me about something like that, so I was positive what we said was the truth.
That was actually the truth. All my run-ins with non-prescription drugs happened the next year, and it was only marijuana.
I've since come to realize that support side schizonomics means not always trusting what the one you are supporting says. In fact, the first time he was hospitalized, he had lied about his eating habits and his medical regimen. He had been skipping his psychologist prescribed routine, and the nurse made sure to us that the lapse in his skipped meds was actually a trigger for his abnormal behavior. At this point, I had never seen anything like this, not even on TV. And this was the first time I had even thought that his mental illness was going to be something more than just like a fluke. We were going to be in for a long and troublesome journey. One piece of advice that was hard for my family to actually digest was that from this point on, he was not going to have complete and full control of his behavior. And at this point, I think I want to let you talk about what happened during your quote-unquote coma from your side of things.
Yeah, I was admitted into the emergency room, and then the social worker informed me that I would be transferred to the adolescent wing of Henry Ford Kingswood Hospital. It was there I experienced a series of dreams that would go on to heavily influence my delusions and hallucinations in the future. While being transferred to Kingswood, I remember my first vision of the ambulance being a helicopter.
Only you can prevent forest fires. Just play. Only you can control the weather and turbulence during the helicopter ride. The more you think or move, the closer the helicopter gets to crashing. Remain in the salute position.
To this day, I still have no idea what I experienced during the actual first hospitalization. When I arrived at the hospital, I remember strange occurrences, such as the power going in and out depending on what happened to my body. If while I was on the stretcher, there were any bumps, the power would go out, and also I had the strangest inclination that I can control the weather as lightning and thunder would boom, depending on the blink of my eyes. If I could describe it, I would say it was like the Kanye West Stronger video. For those that have never seen it, it's essentially Kanye envisioning a futuristic dystopian setting based on one of his favorite anime movies, Akira. In the morning, I woke to a dark, overcast sky, and thus began my service in my very own mental military corps. The mental health technician came to my room.
Morning vitals.
Up, soldier. About face.
I get up with my hand touching my head in salute fashion.
March, soldier.
I begin to walk.
I said march, maggot.
My knees hop up a little higher in response.
That's it. 1, 2, 1, 2. Left, right, left,
follow the mental health technician while marching and stand next to the chair, waiting for him to give me permission to sit. He looks at me puzzled. At this moment, I believed wholly that I was, in fact, in service to the United States. Because I was like, who else has a voice in their head telling them to do something so peculiar? Come on. Seriously, are your delusions that specific? I say to the mental health technician, "Sir, yes, sir," while flinging my hand away from my head in a completed salute. He looks at me with his jaw wide open in disbelief. He says, "Well, go ahead and sit down." He then pauses, giggles to himself and says, "Soldier." I sit down and he straps my arm into the blood pressure monitor. The reading comes out and he charts it. He then positions the electric thermometer in my mouth. Perhaps this is another part of my delusion, but I remember the thermometer returning something along the lines of an error message. I stop to think about why this is happening and hear a strong vroom. In my delusion, I remember that when I thought too hard, strange things would happen, just like this. Then there were the clicky pens.
Hey, do you hear that?
I think to myself, hear what?
Listen carefully.
I don't hear anything, but why are the lights flickering?
The pens. They're clicking.
Oh shit, now I hear it. What about it?
Blink when you hear it.
I start to do this and notice that, mind you, this was most likely a hallucination. I notice that the lights flicker when I don't blink as prompted. The mental health technician then tells me to stand on the weighing scale. I stand on it and almost let out a squeal. Instead, my eyes open wide and I think to myself, only 120? I can't go into my senior year looking this skinny.
Look forward.
I adjust my eyes away from the scale reading and hear a big outside. The mental health technician clears me to go back to my room, and I march duly back. An hour passes, and the intercom announces, "Breakfast time!" I go to breakfast and follow the directions of my quote-unquote drill sergeant. The passenger had directed me to follow certain staff members as my senior officer. The mental health tech I had currently adopted as my new leader was trying to get me to eat. However, the passenger told me to take a bite every 2 minutes or so. I noticed another staff member who I called Willie, after the football player Willie McGinnis. I had played a lot of ESPN 2K prior to my hospitalization. His features looked very defined, almost as if he were from the video game itself. The passenger told me that he was part of the opposition. I found it ironic that I was supposed to see a purported football player of the Patriots NFL team as an enemy of state. Also, the Patriots were my favorite football team, which made it even stranger. Sometimes I even saw him in a two-dimensional form, appearing like a cartoon. It got even worse when they would let us into the gym. The mental health tech would say, "Recess." I would get up and march toward the mental health tech. He would lead us through some hallways into a big basketball court. It seemed like the physics in the room was completely off kilter. I would try to throw the basketball, and it would seemingly fly in the other directions. I would do this all while marching and saluting in between shots.
The physics is your fault. Do some push-ups to make it normal.
I obliged and hit the floor.
Lie on your stomach and salute.
I do this and continue to do it even after recess is done. The MHTs have to carry me back to my room. They start yelling, "Are you okay?" I don't respond. They say, "Call the code." Some more MHTs come to carry me to my room, including Willie. The dark passenger tells me to struggle and try to kick Willie, while the MHTs struggle to get me to my room. From that point on, I'm restricted to my room by the dark passenger, even meals in my room. The only time it lets me leave the room is for the fine arts time because, well, the teacher was attractive. My delusions had led me to believe that she was Alicia Keys. No way in hell am I going to miss a chance of being in the same room as Alicia Keys. Long story short, she was not Alicia Keys. The weekend passes and the doctor comes to see me. He was a short white doctor who reminded me of Stifler from American Pie, in both speech and appearance.
Hey, Muff. I'm Dr. B. Well, you're experiencing symptoms of what we would call catatonia. Our method of treatment will be ECT, otherwise known as electroconvulsive therapy.
My outward appearance in no way, shape, or form reflected how I was feeling on the inside. So let me describe the feelings of a man off to the electric chair. And what crazy-ass doctor goes along with this charade?
Stay frozen and stay silent.
I try to scream and move, but nothing happens. I start to plead internally that the dark passenger let me speak. Please, this is gonna ruin my future. Please, please, senior year is only a couple days away.
You're saving the world. Don't even worry about school.
The doctor leaves my room, and I bury my head in my pillow and begin to cry. Soon, a mental health technician comes to get me and says we need to get in the checker cab for an appointment in downtown Detroit at Henry Ford Hospital. Another stormy morning as I get shuttled off into a cab with my companion MHT. We arrive at the hospital and take the elevator to the ECT site. A nurse comes in and takes me into the OR. She begins a pretest. She asks me to spell world backwards and count by sevens up to 100.
Don't mess up. The security of the world is at stake.
I wonder if the world knew how serious the events of happening in a small, somewhat old hospital room in the middle of downtown Detroit was. Had the dark passenger informed them that my life was so crucial for their own well-being? I answered the questions correctly and let out a sigh of relief knowing I was correct. Then it's off to the electric chair. Over the past couple of days, I had wondered if my intelligence would be affected. My intelligence is what I considered one of my strongest selling points of my identity. Knocking a couple points off my IQ would certainly depreciate my pricing index.
I guess there you have it, folks. Insider trading tips on the human stock exchange.
The anesthesiologist walks into the room and introduces himself.
Hello, I'm Dr. So-and-so. I will be putting you under for today's procedure.
He proceeds to inject me with drugs. What a pleasant transaction. I say nothing and he gets to stick me with all sorts of gunk. Soon the procedure ends and I wake up in a small separate hospital room for recovery, still downtown however. Now this is one thing that get extremely weird. They give me the remote control for the TV.
Stop thinking and listen to my commands.
I try to quiet my mind on my Jedi-ish and fail, and experience a vision of a plane crashing outside of my window. The dark passenger makes no mistake in calling it my fault. I recall a couple days later outside of the hospital hearing a news story about the crash of a Russian plane. I hoped and still hope that this was just a coincidence. Now the passenger had convinced me I was powering the sun, which is why the weather was so stormy during the summer.
Drink the sun cup. That was the name of the hospital's fruit juice supplier. Drink the sun cup and stare into the lights.
I oblige once again and try not to blink. This continues for the remainder of the 11 other shock therapies over the course of 4 weeks. During this period, I had continued to have more strange visions. One remarkable vision was me being the blood transfusion patient chosen to save Michael Jackson. I developed one of my most peculiar fears of being raped while in this coma stint. This fear would persist even until the present day, because hey, I'm not an ugly guy. I imagined myself multiple times like Tom DuBois from Boondock screaming, "You can't have my booty! You can't have my booty!"
What?
My brother would visit me occasionally and I was usually silent. Maybe he can give you some insight into what it was like from an outsider's perspective.
Well, first off, you ugly as hell, bro. But one of the man, this was honestly one of the scariest points of my life, to be honest with you. I got really bad memory and I'm gonna try to piece this together as best as I can, but honestly I blocked a lot of this off from memory just because it was just such a shitty traumatic time. So I think back when you were first sent to Kingswood Hospital, like you talked about earlier, you just flat out stopped speaking, eating, and your motor skills in general were just declining. And we thought when we took you to the hospital, they would give you some magical pill or something or a shot and you would be good in like less than 72 hours. But man, bro, we couldn't have been any more wrong. Yeah, I specifically remember it going from you blinking really fast where you could see your eyes in between blinks to a point where you could barely even open your eyes at all, right? But you were just repeatedly opening and closing your eyes. And this was and that went from being intermittent to you not even being able to open your eyes at all when you were at Kingswood. Then it got really scary because you completely lost all motor functionality and you weren't able to move at all. And I think you would twitch every now and then, but that was it. They ended up having to put you on an IV drip because you weren't able to eat, you couldn't move, you couldn't do anything, and had lost at least 30 to 40 pounds in like at least a couple weeks, and I think at least 3-4 weeks. I can't remember the exact time, but it was something like 3-4 weeks. And I was thinking like worst case scenario, in all honesty, because for our intents and purposes, you were basically in a coma, or what we thought was a coma. In all actuality, catatonia is different from a coma. My understanding is that when you're in a coma, the patient, when a person's in a coma, the patient is effectively brain dead and in a vegetative state and unconscious. But with catatonia, you didn't have any control over your body, and you couldn't speak, but you were still conscious at the time, right? Like your mind was still actually working. It was actually more of a psychological effect as opposed to a coma. It's extremely dangerous because it could actually lead to the death of a patient, right? Just due to the patient not eating and not being able to take care of themselves. And it wasn't until the doctors at Henry Ford suggested the ECT to us that things started to look up. And like you said earlier, I think you ended up receiving 11 treatments over a 4-week period. This was back and forth, us visiting the hospital, us staying for an hour, you not talking or anything. You would just be sitting there like a vegetable, to be honest with you. Like you couldn't talk, you couldn't eat, do anything. So it was rough, man. It was a rough couple weeks. But after the whole ECT procedure, man, when you came out of that catatonic state and you were able to finish your senior year and you made the honor roll, you got accepted to University of Michigan for college, it was one of the proudest moments of my life, man. You really persevered over the last 2 years of your high school career. If you guys remember, in the previous year, he ended up in juvie for a couple weeks, actually.
Man, shut this boring ass dude up.
Yeah, electroconvulsive therapy has been proven to help people suffering from extremely severe symptoms of mental illness. It is definitely not for everyone and is really actually a scary process. They're triggering a mini seizure in your brain in hopes that it will cause changes in your brain chemistry to reverse the effects of mental illness. Warning, it will not cure your mental illness. It is going to be a lifetime battle, but in cases of coming out of a coma-like catatonic state, it did the job for me.
Yeah, that shit tickled. But guess what? I'm still here. You know why? 'Cause we ain't going nowhere. We ain't going nowhere. We can't be stopped now. 'Cause it's Schizoid for life.
Yeah.